One important part of any proposal is to put together the budget, and one of the ways in which people typically start on that is to begin working on it early on and get some agreement in terms of what is the total amount of funding that is available and what are the allowable expenses.
Given that for most grants, you don't have an infinite budget. You know, you have to bring it in at, say, $300,000 or $1 million or $20,000. You've got to really be ingenious and think about how are you going to apportion the various components of what you need to reach your goal among those different categories.
And you want to make sure the money is going to be spent. You don't want to inflate the budget. But at the same time, and one of the problems we had is that we kind of underestimated the costs of some of the expenses. So you want the budget to be as realistic as possible. You have to detail the budget. If anybody's ever done a federal grant, that's a very time-consuming process. But you want to, detail the budget, and you have to justify the budget, a separate document of justifying every expense within the budget.
When I think about how to draw a budget for a proposal, what I generally think about is I kind of work backwards. I say, okay, here's the finished product that I want. What do I need to have? What do I need to do in order to reach that goal?
We always begin with the faculty that'll be involved, or staff. And that's always the most expensive part. The beauty of communication is that we don't need an expensive lab. So we don't have to begin with $1.5 million to get a level 3 biosecurity space. We can begin with people.
It could be for a postdoc, could be for, in some cases, a programmer or other staff member on a research project. And of course, a big part of it is for funding for graduate students, and in some cases, undergraduate students as well. So these are all personnel costs. And typically, the amount that you're budgeting here is not just the salary that is received by the individual, but also includes a budget for fringe benefits, as well as what universities refer to broadly as overhead expenses. And sometimes that also includes the tuition associated with a graduate student. So what might appear to be a very modest amount of money that is actually being received by the personnel will suddenly balloon.
And then there are the different kinds of equipment needs that you have. What can you buy? What is allowable? What is permissible? What do they expect your university to provide? And that's another question. So that's a part of the budget that's difficult to deal with.
And so this would include anything from laptops to accessories to large pieces of equipment, video capture equipment that some of us might use. And so all of these are, again, situations where typically the moment you're submitting a proposal, you need to put together a fairly accurate price listing of the equipment that you want. The more precise you can be in terms of the equipment you want, the better you have rhetorically been able to convey to the reader of the proposal that you know exactly what you want to do.
But then there's also something that communication scholars have to think about, and that is travel. Typically, we have to go somewhere to get the data, to get the talk, to get what's going on, to get that information. So a lot of the scientists I know never leave their laboratory. They get the different kind of chemicals they need and they run their examinations. But we've got to travel, we've got to go on site. So that's a unique aspect.
We had, you're paying travel for people who were coming in for the conference to help plan the project.
So don't be shy about putting a travel budget. And this travel could be either to go to different locations, or it could be, in the case of a collaborative grant, to spend time with collaborators. And it's not just travel for the principal investigator, it could also be for graduate students who want to travel from one place to another. A second type of travel charge, of course, is associated with going to conferences and events where you disseminate the results of the project. And so that's a separate part of the transportation budget, travel budget, that needs to be included. In most cases, funding agencies would like you to be able to take the results of the study and bring it to different forums. Some of them may be in your own discipline, others could be to a larger public audience.
You've got to read the print closely because there are certain things they will not pay for. NEH, there are a lot of things they won't pay for, like machine or computer equipment. They will not pay for it, but in some cases they may pay for some computer packages. But it's very detailed. They say very explicitly what they will or will not pay for. And the other thing that's important about NEH is that they don't support writing textbooks. They have an educational division, which we applied for. They paid they supported our creation of materials to be used in the classroom. If we said, we're going to make a textbook out of this, then we would be done.
You know, sometimes equipment, quote unquote, doesn't refer to things like video cameras or computers. It refers to buying a database or having time to spend at an archive that requires a contribution.
In terms of the indirect costs, this is your home institution's projection of what it's going to cost for you to run this project, and they want a cut of that. So it may be anything from the paper you're using to your computers to your staff support, and it comes from the Office of Research, who's is being taxed because they're having to process your grant, to the larger university, to the university gets a cut, your college gets a cut, department gets a cut. If there's a center, they may get a cut. So at the last time I applied for a grant, which was actually last year, it was 48.5%. So you have to add that as part of the cost that's going to come out of what you're going to actually get from the grant. On the other hand, then hopefully your home institution, it's really important for them to cost share, who also contribute to the grant. Some grants require it, and even if they don't require it, there's debate about institutions don't want to provide it if it's not required, but you want them to because it looks like there's institutional support. So you really want to try to wrangle that if you can, I think.
Well, at NSF, we have a very strong peer merit review process. In our directorate, the Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences, we typically do what's called a mixed review. We have ad hoc reviewers who we identify specifically because they have the targeted expertise to judge that particular proposal. They have that sort of depth. And they usually mail in their review or electronically submit it. There's also a standing panel. And those individuals are usually selected for their breadth of expertise, that they can handle a wide range of proposals. So a proposal comes to a panel, usually one or two panelists look at it, and since they're looking at it within the context of several, dozens even, of proposals, they can tell not only how competitive it is, but also how it ranks against other proposals. So it's sort of a depth and breadth kind of review process.
So we are employing a two-tier review process for the vast majority of our fellowships, whereby the first review is happening on the level of the discipline, the subfield, the regional specialty of an application, to make sure that it is sound, innovative, well-formulated, and making a contribution on that level. But the final selection is always done by an interdisciplinary committee.
All NIH applications have a minimum set of 3 reviewers assigned to that application to write critiques and to sort of be the advocates for that application in this meeting. All of the members of that study section, without conflicts of interest, will discuss on that application and will vote on its scientific and technical merits.
The review process for proposals that are sent in is often quite mysterious in some places and very transparent in other places. At places like the National Science Foundation, it's a very transparent process in the sense that you know that any proposal that you submit to them is going to be reviewed by your peers. It's transparent in terms of the process. It is absolutely opaque in terms of the actual people who are going to do the review.
With the NEH, they would bring together a group of people and a variety of institutions, high school teachers to research institutions. The first cut is usually they get the proposals and they send in their rankings to the program officer. They don't meet. And so they do a first cut that way. Then the ones that make it through the cut, then they bring them to Washington, D.C. and they sit around the table and they talk about them. That program officer, the one that you've hopefully been dealing with, is the one leading this meeting. So that's why that person is so important.
The review process gets a little different and a little less transparent when you go to other agencies. For example, in the Department of Defense, in many cases, the review process, it does not have a formal review panel. In some cases, it's a program officer who might identify specific individuals that he or she chooses to have a look at it. In some cases, the reviews are done internally by people within the government. In other cases, they might also request external faculty members to come in and send in reviews. It's not always the case that there is an actual panel that is assembled that discusses it. It is often done on an ad hoc review basis where individuals are asked to comment on one or more proposals. And in those cases, the program officer has much greater discretion in terms of making a decision about which particular proposal is funded.
And all the selection committees that we convene at ACLS are interdisciplinary, which means that it's senior scholars from a variety of disciplines in the humanities and the humanistic social sciences that meet here at ACLS to talk in depth about each individual proposal that makes it to the final round and decide collectively on the outcome of the competition. The scholarly committees are autonomous, so their decision is final. We do not have a chairman who has the final review. When the committee members leave, we have a list of recipients.
So there is a strong code of conduct at NSF that if you're invited to a panel, you cannot disclose to anyone that you were serving on a specific panel on certain specific dates. And anything that is discussed during that panel review stays in that room and does not go out. At other instances, the system varies a little bit. At the National Institutes of Health, they actually publish the people who are on the review panels. So everyone knows who was on the review panel. It is still the case that whatever is discussed in that room is considered confidential. And there have been occasions where an individual saw my name on a review panel and chose to call me and said, "I can't believe that my project was rejected." And that's a situation where there's nothing that can be said or done about that. And it's inappropriate to approach somebody who's on a review panel, and it's inappropriate for a panelist to make any comment about that.
The other thing that's great about the federal grants system is that they will look at your proposal in advance. So if you draft your proposal and give them plenty of time, you've got to be ahead of the game. You can't be doing this last minute. But they sometimes at least 6 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks out, you can send it to them and they will give you feedback. Wow. And that is really important, not only because it identifies issues that you may be able to catch and fix before you actually submit it.
Private funding agencies sometimes will have their program officers work with you on a revise and resubmit, where you can actually, they can look at the proposal that you've submitted and say, I really would want you to change something here and make the focus there. And if that's something that you feel is valuable to you and would be serving your interests as well, then you can iterate with the program officer on redrafts of proposals.
The first time we applied, we got not so good across the board, and I doubt we made it. Actually, we did, we did make it to the next cut because we got 2 evaluations. Second time we got good across the board with a couple of very goods, and the third time we actually got it was very good across the board. So, you can get that back. People wrote comments. You take those comments. When you don't get the grant, then you ask for the comments, and then you ask to talk to the program officer again, because you want to find out, get more feedback. If they're giving you somewhat positive feedback and saying this is what was wrong with your grant application and this is what the concerns were, but it's still a fit for us, then if they're giving you any kind of feedback, and they oftentimes will, about whether or not you should keep applying, then you've just got to put the work in and it will pay off maybe in the end, but there's no guarantees, and that's, I suppose, the hardest part of it.